All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Camila Picoj. I am a ComLead Alumni Fellow, and as of this week, I am a UX writer for Amazon. That means I write words in the user interface that help people understand how to do things on apps and websites. On behalf of ComLead, I would like to welcome you to our student-run speaker series. Our topic tonight is content strategy, a case study in skill building conversation. It's a lovely evening here in Seattle, so thank you all for joining us. I have a few announcements before we get started. Um, we will recording tonight's conversation. So if you have the bandwidth, please turn on your camera. It's always great to see your faces, but please keep your microphone off. We will follow Jan and MCC's talk with a Q&A session. So please type your questions into the chat box. I will collect and post the questions to Jan and MCC for a portion of our time tonight. So now let me introduce our speakers. Jen Davis has spent 15 years in tech, first at Expedia, where she worked in sales, then merchandising, and finally found her way in content management. Now she's at Facebook, where she works as a content strategy manager on a developer platform team. She focuses on creating great product experiences that work for people where they feel confident and supported in their journey. Then we have the MCC, the Multicultural Community Center Coalition is a group of several immigrant and refugee serving community organizations in Southeast Seattle. Their vision is Seattle is a city that is diverse, just, equitable, and free of racism, in which community of colors have the power and authority to determine their futures and where all people thrive. Jen and MCC, thank you for joining us this evening. Let's kick it off with a short video.
Does the COVID-19 pandemic have you or your organization struggling to connect? The University of Washington's Communication Leadership Program is here to help. We have assembled our COVID-19 consultancy to help nonprofits, small businesses, and on-campus departments. We can help you communicate within your organization and with your audience, pivot communication strategies in the face of COVID-19, create videos and other multimedia assets, and host online events. As community builders and communication professionals with expertise in digital technology, our graduate students and alumni are uniquely equipped for this moment. We're offering pro bono consulting, events, and professional connections. Whether you're a business owner, an employee, or simply looking to improve your communication strategies, we're here to help you. For more information and to schedule a consultation, visit bit.ly/UWCOVIDhelp.
Great. All right. So Jen, Jordanos, and Shiku, please take it away.
Sure. I think we're starting with brief intros. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. Camila, thank you for the very kind intros. So there's not a lot more to say, but I have been very excited to get to work on this project. It's such a need and there's so much opportunity. And these lovely ladies are extremely focused on doing the best they can for their communities. So the more we can do to help them, the better. My background, like Camila said, is in building great experiences for people. And I think one of the ways you do that is by focusing on what people need and what they need out of websites and what they need out of the digital experiences they're going through. And the more we can focus on that, the better experience we'll create for everyone. And then also the people who have the website, what are the jobs that they're putting their website to work to do? So, Jordanos, do you want to take it off?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. My name is Stefari, and I've been with MCC since 2018. I actually joined because I joined the board of the Eritrean Community Center, which is a member of the Multicultural Community Coalition. And so my background is law, and I just happened to start working on the project that MCC is working on and just really just got sucked into it and have been with I'm actually playing a bigger role with the organization at this point in time. So I will leave it there. I will allow Shiko to introduce herself and then we'll tell you a little bit more about MCC.
Hi, I'm Shiko Onena, and I've been working with MCC for now a year through the RVC fellowship program. And my background is in public health. but it's been quite a joy just to be part of the team and help to fulfill the mission.
Thank you, Shiko. And to tell you all a little bit about MCC, it's a coalition that actually got it formed through the process of the light rail going in on MLK, and so the city recognized that that was going to really just change lives, and it really has. And so the city actually got a HUD grant at the time, and it convened some community meetings to try to identify what the community priorities were and still are. And out of that, convening of leaders of various community-based organizations, the MCC was born around 2010, but more formally as a coalition. It was a steering committee for a while, and around 2014. And so it's a coalition of refugee, immigrant, and people of color-led organizations. And as the group started working together, I should say the community priority that was identified was the need to build a multicultural community center. And that's part of the Othello neighborhood plan. And it's also part of the city's comprehensive equitable development plan. So it's been codified in those two places. And as I said, the coalition's been working on that priority, and the work actually evolved into also identifying the need to build co-working space for the various community-based organizations that stand to be at risk of displacement. And so we've been working on that two-pronged project for a good part of a decade, trying to raise money, and recently trying to also, last year was quite involved in that. We were engaged in design and capital campaign because we're supposed to start construction at the end of this year. That's all been, there have been other challenges that have come about with the timeline and with partnership situation, but nevertheless, it's just, there's just been, we were engaged in trying to build the building, so to speak. And I would say, just shifting to our comms challenges, it's been capacity. It really has. At the point that we finally began building capacity within the organization, with me joining as a staff member, we've always had a coalition manager who's been with the organization since 2015, but just for a few hours. So as we grew in capacity, our workload also grew. And so we finally got a website, but it's just the first run of it. It's not the best of websites. We don't have social, why am I blanking? We don't have yes, thank you, social media footprint whatsoever. And so what's been sad, so to say, is that we're engaged in doing a lot of the work, because we also have a shared programming component with what we do. So the various organizations doing things along the lines of youth development and senior meals or aging services and other leadership development efforts, where we're starting to capture those efforts, but we're not putting them anywhere. We're not sharing them. And so we've been just very, very stretched thin. And so we're trying to see how we can do better and maybe get some assistance in doing that a whole lot better.
Awesome, thank you for that. And I know when we talked a little bit ago, one of the things that you really wanted to do is also tell stories about the really positive stories, which I just love that. Like, there are so many good stories that come out of these initiatives, and making sure that people realize that there are these wonderful stories to highlight, I think is great. So when we talked last time, one of the things we talked about was what you wanted your website to do for you, especially with being a coalition. That's a little bit of a challenge. You want to amplify. I think we talked about resources as well, being sort of a resource center. And then also potentially engaging the community a little bit more. And for folks who want to follow along at home, the website is mcc-othello.org, and it's beautiful. It is beautiful. So like take full ownership. It is a gorgeous website. It needs to be doing more for you, but like, it is beautiful. Like, the picture is really cool and the setup's really nice. So let's talk about, like, what are you hoping that the website does for you?
We're hoping that it tells the story. It really just captures how MCC came to be. Because one of the things that we've recognized is whether we're talking to funders or partners, our origin story has kind of gotten lost. And I say that, we're, as I said, a big portion of our project is the Multicultural Community Center, which we coined the Cultural Innovation Center. So because that portion of the project is a little, it's hard to make that pencil gathering space, especially now, we would say. But the further we've gone along with the project, partners have started questioning whether we should be building it, forgetting the origin story. So that's been sad to witness, just because that is the impetus for MCC. And so we need that to just solidify the origin story, and to also solidify the fact that it is a community priority that's been identified by that neighborhood, and that needs to come to fruition. It's a commitment that the city made to those communities. And so we'd like it to do that. As you said, we'd like it to speak to the work of not only MCC, but also of the coalition members. And I think that's where we've gotten stuck, because we were waiting for some coalition members to get their websites updated. And yeah, it's just, which do we do first? And then also we'd like it to be a resource center as much as it can be. So yeah, there's a lot we'd like it to do, but just those basics would be a tremendous start.
Gotcha. And I know last time that we talked about like things that like MCC would need to write and create, and things that maybe could be sourced from community members, or maybe putting, there's a donate tab right now that we also discussed, of putting that to work. But let's focus first on the like story question, the telling your story. And you have a who we are. And I'm wondering, and I know that like every minute is precious. And just so you know, like content is always a problem. Like it's never easy. No one ever has it figured out. There are reasons that Camilla and I have jobs, like content's a pain. And it's expensive and you have to maintain it. But I was noticing on the Who Makes Up the MCC page, like the who we are, there's an opportunity there to say who you are in relation to those organizations. And that may be content that you want to spend some time with and actually like get to the shape that you want to, so you can tell that story. And then for the donate page right now, you've got some really great imagery on there, which is awesome. Like, I wonder if we could move that like somewhere else, so it's pulled in. We have more of that story, and like sort of like it feels like, I know there was another question last time about liveliness. And even just like having the images move, you're like, oh, there's stuff going on. Like they're gathering community. Like this is really wonderful. Unless we the other thing we talked about changing donate to was volunteering.
Right.
The other question that I asked was, okay, actually I'm having a conversation by myself here. I'm going to ask the question. We'll do it for everyone. With the donate, is that useful, or could that be put to more of a put to better work, as it were?
We definitely like the idea of having a volunteer button instead of a donate for this at this point in time. What we are aiming to do with the capital campaign, we're not really asking for donations from individuals at this point in time. We recognize that at the tail end of our campaign, we may do some things where individuals may want to donate, but for right now, we're really looking for philanthropic dollars, as well as the contributions by our state and local institution, or funders, I should say. And so, yeah, so there's less of a use for that at this point in time. So if we could change that, that would be, I think that would be a good change.
Yeah, and that might be an easy, like, because I know, like, you also don't want to manage a ton of volunteers either. But maybe there's some clear, like getting an editor in who could then be the person who then goes and sources those articles. And maybe even like a couple hours a week where they're going to those other websites, to your point, and just updating the website with those events. Because it does require, the problem with events is they always require updating or linking to Facebook. And there are some technology solutions where you can get a feed of events that you could try and put in, but then there's always the question of, are they using Facebook? Are they using Eventbrite? Are they using a different system? how are you getting it in, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that would be like a good first step, is to get some volunteer energy. The nice thing, not nice thing, for people seem to have more time right now than money. And so it's a good time to be looking for time and for investment of social like impact versus looking for money. There's also, I just saw a headline recently that was like, people who invest in their community feel more connected in this time where we're all sitting at home in our attic spaces or our living rooms or our bedrooms or wherever we found a place that the sun isn't shining directly in our eyes. So that might be something, if I can find that article, I'll send it over to you. And then you could put that up there and say like, hey, there's a good reason to like reach out and join us right now. Yeah, so that, did you go ahead?
No, I was just reflecting that would be great. We've also, and Chico, maybe you can speak more to this, but we've been trying to attract youth. We have youth members within the individual organizations, but we've been trying to make the coalition more attractive for all youth. And so that would be a way to do that as well.
Yeah, one of the greatest things about our organization, it being a coalition, is we have this very multi-generational community, right? And so how do we create a platform or a space where they can all feel a sense of ownership to what's happening within the community, and really helping to fulfill MCC's mission? Because it's a collective mission, right? And it would be great to, as we get youth volunteers and even having them, I know me and my friends have sat down and be like, so we're poor, but we want to do something that really is speaking to these times. We really want to support organizations that are combating displacement. We want to support POC, BIPOC specific organizations, and where do we even begin to do that research? So if we could create a platform where youth could really feel like, here's a coalition of Black and Brown Indigenous organizations that are doing the work that is aligning with, our current personal mission, like that would be awesome, right?
I love that. It's also really good for those folks because they learn some really good skills that are very portable. Learning how to be a social media manager in this day and age, that's a very marketable skill. And the cool thing is, if you have content from those other organizations, you could start by amplifying. So you don't have to start by creating. You could actually have someone and say, hey, can you be our social media manager? And what we're going to do is just go out to those websites, go out to those organizations, and just start posting their content in, so that you're bringing in that liveliness and that sort of heartbeat of content that might help them out. I really love that idea.
I have a question as far as like even getting MCC's story on the page, like Yordano's described. We have over 10 years worth of history, right? What is the best way to really get that on our website without it being, because how do you condense 10 years worth of like work and activism and community engagement in a way that's digestible for an audience?
That is a phenomenal question. That is like such a content strategy question. It's amazing. It depends on what you think people want to get out of it. So if the action you want people to take away after reading it is, I feel so inspired, I want to get involved, I want to go do things, then you probably want more of a story format where you're telling, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, we started, well, actually you want to start, definitely want to start. But you don't have to talk about every single year, everything that happened, like, because there'll be boring years. There'll be years where, we did a lot of like investigation, and that's a very short story for that one. But sort of doing the highlights and creating an arc that lands that, by the way, we need your help. We're asking for your input. We want your engagement in your community, building skills to help us build the future. That can be a really nice way to do it. And you can do that in 3-4 paragraphs even, just keeping it really tight and thinking about, if I were a person, what are the highlights of your story that I would just go, oh gosh, that's so great. Like the promise from the city, I think is a wonderful thing to highlight, because that says like there's an investment and there's a commitment to actually take this forward. And that's really important for a lot of nonprofits. They don't necessarily have that level of commitment built in. So I think that's really good to call out. And to your point about the partners, that's actually that's another key audience that'll want to see that history. You may also, oh, that's a good question. If partners would want to see like a timeline of what's happened, that might be sort of having like the paragraphs at the top and the timeline in the bottom. So just sort of that like, hey, we've been here a long time. Like, you can trust us. We're cool. That might be a good like, what's the like trust signal, like longevity signal might be a nice thing. And that way you don't have to like tell the whole story in the paragraphs, but you still have the compelling like emotional side that sort of welling up and things, and then the sort of factual. It also gives you a place to put like any documentation that people ask for regularly. Down at the bottom, you can just say like, hey, here's like, if you're a 501c3, you can put that in, all those pieces that people regularly are looking for.
That's great.
I think what I like the most about that is there we go. I think what I like the most about that is you have both a visual and, you know, a component to, you know, the narrative that we would post about, you know, so you're engaging, you know, different types of people. Because there's somebody, like there are times, if I'm honest with myself, where I go and check out an organization's website, I'm like, long, you know, or, you know, you just from a tired, especially like when I was a student, I just didn't want to read anymore. And so you just want to be able to have a visual component that shows you this is the highlights that you need to know about the organization. And hopefully it would encourage the reader to also want to read the paragraph after seeing the visual component.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because you could actually illustrate. I always forget about not video, like just those photos, the beautiful photos that are still rotating on my screen. You could put those as like highlights in the paragraphs to sort of say like, here's what we did then. Like if there's a groundbreaking moment, or if there's like a signing moment, like if you were signing something with the city, that would be a really cool picture to put in to sort of just like help echo to your point. That's a really, really great point to call out, that we are like, what's in the words, you don't have to read it all in detail. There's a visual as well. I like that. That's a really great idea.
Yeah, that's generally what captures me for websites. I mean, when it comes to community-based organizations, I want to see what they're doing as opposed to reading about it. So I've always, the ones that have either photos or videos, those are the ones I tend to gravitate towards, just because, you know, that content in itself says so much more than just maybe words can.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like the homepage right now is beautiful, but it's very static. There might be a way to find, it looks like you're using Squarespace.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So if there are some templates, I think, that have a smaller header, and then you can put more of that like event content underneath. So to your point, like you have the beautiful image, but you also then have that liveliness, that like there's things going on. Here's the story, sort of heartbeat going.
For social media, we've been told in the past that, you know, the way to make that as easy as possible is just to have it so that it's automated to go to, or to be for postings to go on Twitter and Facebook. And one of our partners does it that way with some youth members that they work with. Would you say that that's the way to kind of keep the flow going?
It is an easy way. So it makes it easier because you're posting to all channels. You're able to keep your message consistent. But there are different audiences. And so that's the one thing I would say is Twitter tends to be a little bit punchier, a little bit like faster. Instagram tends to be more visual, less about the words, more about the visual, and then a link to go read more. And Facebook tends to be more about like words and engagement and like conversations. So you can do that to get started, and that's an easy way to get started. But if you have the bandwidth and the time to get the most out of the channels, you probably want to customize a bit, but you don't have to. I mean, just having that, like starting to have information will have people realize, oh wait, there's something going on here.
Okay. Great.
Now with the social media, like especially if you're looking at a platform like Instagram, where it's more, pictures, where you just kind of post, this is what's happening. And it's, at least when I see organizations engage on social media, it's usually like, here's this happening, or here's this event that's happening. How do you not just make it so you're only posting the events, right? What kind of strategy would you recommend to continue to have relevancy, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm just, here's this photo that you've seen, and
Right.
here's another photo that you've seen, right? What is a
Totally.
really good way to kind of get engagement on social media?
Yeah, I mean, I think people will go for value of what they want to get out of the social media. So yeah, so it is more visual on Instagram, but I think there's also, like, I've seen the woman who wrote So You Want to Talk About Race, her Instagram is amazing. Like, she goes, so you want to talk about, and it's whatever. And you flick through and it's all these, like, it's only words. There's no, like, I mean, it's beautifully laid out words, but you actually learn something every time she posts something on Instagram. That content is expensive to create, so I'm not saying like do that. That would take a lot of work. But those resources that you were talking about, like if you created a resources section, you could do like a resource of the week, or something that sort of says, like, we're going to talk about what resources are available to our community and highlight, or if something happens. So let's say like the fires in California, if those were happening here in near cities, what are the resources that are available for someone in that situation? Anything that's going on in your community is always a good thing to sort of tie into. Even if you're posting something that you've shared before, like a resource or something like that, you can say, hey, based on this recent event, we feel like this resource would be relevant to folks right now. And that sort of helps give them the idea that someone's there and thinking about it, and actually like being thoughtful about what they're posting.
I guess now the follow-up question I have on that is, so many questions, but now if you want to really create not only like, because usually you want to have uniformity, right? Your website and your socials, right, should all be telling a singular story. What is a way that you've seen with like mobilizing? If we want to like mobilize towards this particular effort or cause, or we're bringing light to like an injustice that's happening within the community, how do you recommend strategically going about that?
Whew, boy, dusting off some old skills here. I've not done a lot of social media programming, so just like to set expectations. But what I have seen work for other organizations is being consistent but customized, if that makes sense. So like you have the website as the core space, and then you can brand or like put something on it, like even an icon that sort of says, this is the campaign we're talking about. And then you can vary the message by channel. So if people are following you on all channels, they're not just going, oh, this is the same, like, because I don't know if folks are like me and you look at you follow the same things on Instagram and Facebook, and because they're still my favorite things. And I always appreciate it when they're slightly different, at least. But on message, to your point, there is a need to sort of have that, like, this is what we're talking about right now. Seattle Humane is actually really good at this. The Seattle Humane Society, like, they will post videos more on Instagram, some things on like that on Facebook, but more the images and the stories tend to be a little more prominent on Facebook, but it's always the same content sort of repurposed, if that makes sense. So like they're doing an Empty the Shelters thing initiative right now. And so they're featuring one animal a week. It's the best content ever. So good. But they've got, the volunteers are videoing the dog doing something this, and it might be in a different order on Facebook. So like you'll see like the image first instead of the video, whereas on Instagram, it's the video first and then the image. So it's the same content, but if you're flicking through, you might see a different instance of it. And I think that's a really nice way. Again, this is pretty sophisticated and it'll take a lot of work to manage. But that's where those volunteers come in that we're going to find all these young people that we're going to put to work.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to hear, all of these ideas, but I think with most community-based organizations, especially small businesses, you run into a lot of fantastic ideas, a lot of dreams on like how we want to make sure that we're engaging folks, but it always comes down to capacity, right? Do we have the capacity to be able to, execute, and really needing, platforms and resources that make it super, super easy for me to be able to just plug in and send out without having to worry about, like I don't have a lot of hours to dedicate to customizing all of these things, right?
Totally.
Do you know of any tools or resources that are out there that make it super, super easy for me to be able just to post and then it disseminates in a very creative way?
In a creative way, that's a good question. There's a lot more automation tools than there used to be. I am not up to speed on all of those, but Hootsuite is a very popular one for sort of managing in one place your social media channels. So they're one we see regularly. I can look up others after this, or if other folks on this call know of others, please chime in. That'd be a great conversation to have. I am unfortunately not as up to speed on those as I probably should be. But what I will say is, to your point, like even with a tool, it's still going to be hard to keep up with it. So I would pick one or two things that you really want to talk about. And you can either, if you want to have like a daily post, you can create like in one go, create a whole bunch and then schedule them. Or you can say, I'm going to post weekly. And I think that's perfectly fine to just post. Sprout Social. I love the recommendations. Thank you. Thank you. See, I knew my common folks would have other recommendations. Ooh, look at this. Love it.
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah. Thank you all. This is awesome. So yeah, I would do what you can do and think of like, what's the most important message, but also the most important message to the person hearing it. So it can be super hard as an organization. You're like, I want you to know this thing, and I want you to know this one thing right now. And so that then becomes the one thing you're always posting about. And if you think about what the person wants to engage with and wants from you, and actually this is like, we do this so I work on developer spaces, and there's a lot of things developers have to do and a lot of like actions we need them to take. And it can be very repetitive. They're like, you never like tell me things I could be doing to do better. You just tell me the things I need to fix. And it's like, oh, right. We could be telling you like, hey, by the way, you might do this better if. And so that's one of the things that we're exploring, like, because that it's an ongoing conversation with your audience. And so when you figure out like what they need from you and then what you need from them, then it can be a two-way conversation.
Facebook, awesome. I think then, sorry, Yodanos, I don't know if you have any
No, keep going.
questions. But so then with an organization with limited capacity, how do you then figure out like, so we have one staff member that can do this, right? Or we have a volunteer that's willing to do this, but they cannot manage the website and the social media and, yada, yada, yada. So what recommendation would you make in like, do we prioritize the website and then do the social media later? Or do we bolster social media and then slowly like update the website? Where in the hierarchy of like comps do things fall?
It's a great question. And I don't think it's necessarily binary. So I think for the website, from what I heard you saying, getting that story out is pretty important to have a place to link people and to have that be the narrative out there. So I would definitely prioritize getting that. In terms of live content, then you might switch more to social media and to the amplification strategy. So you're not always creating your own until you have more people in place to do that. And then actually the other thing for the website would be then that volunteers tab, where you can actually start to, on the social media channels, say, hey, like, by the way, if you want to get involved, here are some things we could use some help with. And I do find that the more specific you can be about the kind of help you need, the more likely you are to get it. So if you are looking for someone who can actually like run your social media channels, be like, hey, do you want to grow your social media skills? We're looking for someone to come help us out on social media and be our social media manager or something like that. Yeah, so in terms of the website, focusing on like, it has two critical jobs to do right now. One is tell your story. Two is get more people involved so you can tell more stories. And then for social media, it's showing liveliness and gaining traction and awareness that you're out here and you're here to help. And that you can do a lot with like taking what the partners are doing and posting that on your channels. That also helps them, because then they're like, oh my gosh, like you're actually adding value for me. Like you're helping boost my social media and my engagement, sharing their resources. So you don't have to create new every time too. That would be the way I balance it. But yeah, it's more about like, what is the highest priority need and how much time do I have today?
Yeah.
And accept that like some days you won't post, and that's fine. Like that is all good.
I think it's important to always practice grace, right? I think with like small organizations who are really like run down on capacity, right? It can feel really disheartening when you have all of these things that you want to execute, and you don't necessarily have the time or the skills to execute it to the level that you are shooting for.
Yeah.
So reminding folks, you know, I know your dad knows smiling because I'm a woo person. I stay in my feelings. So reminding people just to take care of themselves, especially in these times. That I think the last question that I had for you is now design.
Mm-hmm.
So you have folks like you can have a website, but aesthetically it's not drawing people in, right? So how do you like? Are there websites or tools or resources out there that can help to curate an aesthetically pleasing social media timeline, and kind of like what you were talking about? I don't remember the name of the person you mentioned, but you were saying that it's all words, but the lettering is very beautiful. So if for somebody who does not have graphic design experience, how do we utilize templates already out there to kind of get a really good visual?
That is a great question. Most website builders have templates. So like, I think you're using a template right now with Squarespace. They do have others that include, I believe they have ones that include social media plugins. I'm not, I love this. I love this community. This is the best. Okay. So I will let everyone crowdsource that answer because they will do far better than I will. I've been working for big agencies and Facebook too long, so my knowledge of that is light. But there are fabulous tools for doing this. Again, like focus on the outcomes you want and then see if the tool does that for you. Focus less on the tool. And that's like advice for everyone, not for you, because like I find when I'm going after something like, ooh, here's the tool that will solve all my problems. It never does, ever. But it helps me think about things in a new way. And then you start to think in the model of the tool. So if you start by thinking about what's my problem and does this tool solve it, then you can actually make sure it's not solving you in some ways. Because I find, yes, tools can drive us to do things we didn't intend to.
Awesome. I ran out of questions. I think that was everything that I had.
They were such good questions. We got everyone involved. This is great.
I have one quick one.
Yeah.
So we selected Squarespace because we thought, I think we were advised that it would be easy to put content on it, to make changes, even though we haven't much. Would that have been your advice if it was, you know, you've heard about our organization where we're capacity challenged, or are there better ones out there considering we're about to dive into this work?
It's a great question. I don't know that any of them are any better than the others. Like I've tried Wix, I've tried Squarespace, there's WordPress has some new templates out. WordPress can be really good if you're planning on pushing out a lot of content, like if you want to get a blog going, because that's kind of its bread and butter. But again, I will leave it to the community to give other suggestions, but I haven't seen any ones that are, oh my gosh, you absolutely have to use this one. They're all kind of competing in the same space and tend to be much of a muchness. Is that a word? Yeah. Heard that phrase before. Now I'm like, oh. They tend to do, yeah. I love this group. They're giving you lots of suggestions in the chat. So, but I haven't seen any that make it worth switching off, is I guess what I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Great question. Do we want to take some questions from the poll in that case?
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just taking notes and following the conversation, just, amazing tips. And I will agree with Jen. The website looks phenomenal. It's beautiful. The images really speak to the audience. And as far as converting new donations or volunteers, I would say you can definitely have an opportunity here with the landing page, right? Being like the homepage, the upfront, the place where there's only one purpose, which is to generate leads for your business. And the lead could be donations and volunteers. And I would say, as a Common Lead alumni, there are many people there willing to, stretch their skills and volunteer and help small businesses like yours. So definitely take advantage of the Common Lead community. I'm sure they would be happy to help you. And I have a questions for Jen. There's something that was really interesting you said about amplifying content from partners, not creating new content. Like you said, it takes time. It costs time and money to create content. So I think it's a fantastic idea, and I see that happening in social media like Instagram, right? Amplifying other voices. Can you expand a little bit more on how to do that in different platforms? Like I guess using user-generated content, not only in websites, but also in your social media platforms.
Yeah, I mean, so there's some simple things like on Facebook, you can share their post. I think there are some techniques on how you do that to ensure that you are both like getting seen. So again, I do work at Facebook, but I work on UX writing, so I'm not as good on the social media strategy. Definitely find someone with social media strategy for cross-posting and things like that, because there are ways you can do it that are more effective than others. But at a basic level, I would say if you see they have an event going and they have a link to it, snag the description from their event, post that on Facebook, grab the images if you can, like just right click on them, download, post them with the Facebook post and the link to the event. And then that's a unique thing on your website. So it's not like free sharing. So that gets it more credit or whatever, it gets more posts, more distribution usually. On Instagram, same sort of thing. Take the big image, especially if they got the image and it has like a date on it or something, it's an event, then you can put that as the big image. And then you usually put the link in your Instagram description. But basically finding ways to take the content they have and switch it around slightly and then post it yourself so that they then also see it and other people, it'll reach broader audiences then. Eventbrite also has the function.
Nice.
I love this community. I say that, I'm just like, everyone is helping. Everyone's pitching in. Retweets. Yes, retweets are also awesome. Very, very good point.
Fantastic. Thank you. One more question. Just I'm curious, and then we can go to the audience questions. I already have a couple here. But you talked about telling a story, right? And the most important message you want to put out. And, working in tech, we talk a lot about voice and tone. And for technology, all those companies, they want to sound human, like there is a person behind the screen, right? What would you say for small businesses to establish a voice and tone so they can put the most important message out there? And also, give a personality. So, new partners, volunteers, people interested in donating, they can look at the website and say, oh my God, like I get it. I can feel the human part of that business speaking to me. Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, there's voice and tone is a hard one because you don't want to you have to balance it out because you are looking at like young youth volunteers and you're also looking at partners who are likely to be like more corporate sponsors and things like that. So you don't want to be too flippant or too like light, but you also want to seem human. Little things like contractions can do that. So writing more colloquially, not writing super formally, especially when you're telling your story. Writing more evocatively than functionally. But what I would say is in all the functional elements of the website, make them just very simple and straightforward. Because the nice thing about that is it blends in to other tone. So like navigation elements, like if you're looking for volunteers, not say like young folks come here or something. Like I don't know what you would say. I'm so bad at like voice and tone like myself, but there's a lot of things like making sure that the navigation is clear, making sure it's just very simple, straightforward, will blend then with any tone that you want to write in longer articles or in longer pieces of content. If you want to start having like a close voice and tone, what I would recommend doing is starting with having largely just one person do it. And then that voice kind of becomes the voice of the website. When you start to codify that, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can say, hey, this is how we can put together like a voice and tone framework where you're saying, this is how we talk about this is how we talk about that. This is way down the path when you've got, multiple writers and a whole team of folks creating all your wonderful content. It can help in the short term to say, here's our highest priority items that we want to talk about, and here's how we talk about them. So like key taglines, phrases, descriptions. So like when we were prepping for this, we all sent in our like headshots and bios and everything. Like having that stuff ready, so you're always using the same one, can really help you stay like consistent with what you're saying wherever you're saying it. And then if you have any sort of elements that you want to, like any programs that you're running that have a specific name that you want to reinforce, like you can use that more regularly in things that you're posting, because then people will go, oh, I know what that means. That's that program. I've seen that program before. Yeah. So it's just like reiterating that and saying it the same way. The first time you say it, or actually first couple times you say it, you might want to say program name, our program where this happens. So people who aren't familiar with the program name actually get the full story. But I would not go too far on like being super, super colloquial or like super informal on your website. Just because, yeah, you've got a really broad audience that's coming to your website, and you're likely to alienate one or the other if you go too far. But staying simple, straightforward, and human with just like, oh gosh, that's the other thing, the like grade level that you're aiming for. There's a bunch of tools that can like give you feedback on like what grade level you're writing for, and what's, and it's always lower than you think it should be. So like, I think I was interviewing someone the other day and they're like, oh, I always look for like 3rd grade. I was like, wow, we even go for 5th grade. Like, I was like, that is like next level. I'm not even sure how you test for that, but like, so, pick what level, because you are talking to probably more professional people, at least initially. You can probably raise the grade level a bit there. Yeah. Is that what you were looking for, Camila, or is there more?
Yeah, no, I think that was great. And just explaining a little bit, when we talk about voice and tone, voice is essentially the essence of your business, and the tone is depending on the situation, right? You can be friendly when you're addressing a crisis, for example. Mm-hmm. But at the end, just think of being clear, concise, and useful, right? That's the core of web writing. Yeah. So you're just going to be in a good spot there.
Definitely. Actually, if you want a great example, MailChimp, do they still have theirs out? I think it's called voiceandtone.com. If any of our lovely participants on the call would like to put that link in the chat, I would really appreciate it. But it's awesome because it's sort of like, here's how we talk about error messages. It's a complete like set. So love you, thank you. In fact, now they've got a formal name and everything. But it's a really good like example of what that kind of looks like playing out. So they've got a very tongue-in-cheek tone. And so like even in their error messages, they will say things like oops, or, just be very like lightweight.
Yeah, amazing.
I have a question regarding to voice and tone. When we're telling our story, is it more beneficial to speak in the 3rd person, or like in like this is like we did this, or MCC did this? Like which one is
that's a really good question. I could argue that both directions, actually. I would tend to say for the emotional resonance, I love we, because it brings the community in as well. And you can say, we built this, we were given this, we were, like we tried this. It just feels more personal and more direct. You might only use that in that section. It's a really, really good question. You might use more third person and more like MCC does, provides the following programs. Yeah, but I would definitely lean on we and be more personal in that section just to get the resonance. But you could try it both ways too, in that infinite amount of spare time that you have.
Once I find it, we'll check it out.
Go find it. It's there. It's there. Just, rearrange your calendar.
That's a great question. Yeah, I want to save some time to address some of the questions that we received from the audience. I'm going to start with this one. How can small creators, especially bloggers, utilize their analytics and marketing strategies to grow their audiences?
Oh, golly. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Often what you can do is see what's popular and what's resonating. So, and with who. So if your analytics let you see like where someone is located, if they let you see what like device they're on, even, you can sometimes get some interesting information. But anything that gets more engagement and more views is usually something you want to invest in, and trying to figure out what are the common themes across that. So if you post about phones, I don't know, I'm trying to think of if you post a lot about phones and suddenly people are like, oh gosh, that's super interesting, then you can go, okay, well, maybe I should post more about phones, or use phones as a hook to talk about something else. And that becomes sort of your way in to get more content around that. But definitely looking at each individual post and seeing what the trends are across them and seeing what's working with different groups. Like a friend of mine was trying out, she was trying to learn how to use ads more effectively. And so she started running ads for a page for her dog just to test and find out. And she looked at the analytics and figured out that her dog was quite popular in China. And so now she's like figured out how to like optimize for her dog's photos with this group in China. I have no idea how she did this, but you can look at your analytics and say, okay, where am I popular? Is there something in there that I can build on? And so what you're looking for are peaks that look different in your analytics, in any of the like dimensions, because what you're finding are the people who are uniquely interested in your content and how you can build more for them. The other thing you can do is like find people who will retweet, who will share your content, get people to engage with it more. So you can amplify what you have, but if what you have is, a bunch of people who just want to see pictures of your dog, maybe that's not the message you want to be giving. So then maybe you find the people that you do want to be reaching and what kind of content is being shared with them. That's less analytics. That's more like digging into the research. But that's another way of getting more people engaged. And yeah, finding influencers, that kind of stuff, who can share your content.
Great. Thank you. Here's an interesting one, and that's directed to both of us. My Roomba. So it's about ethics of content creation and dissemination. With respect of, this is from Rini, sorry, one of our comm leaders. With respect to representing the community authentically and doing justice by them, do we have any tips regarding being inclusive and culturally mindful when creating content and sharing them on social media?
Yeah, so I'll give you an actual example. So I help out with the Women of Facebook Design Mentorship Series, and we had very enthusiastically renamed ourselves Women with an X because we were going to be inclusive. We wanted to be inclusive of all women. And then we saw a post on Twitter that said that was very uninclusive. And so what we did was we went to the Transact group and said, hey, like, can you give us feedback here? We'd like some really direct, honest reactions about how you feel about this. And you can do that before you post the thing. I would recommend, if you are going to be like dipping your toes into those waters, to make sure you've actually checked with the communities that you're going to be talking about and trying to help, and find out what's useful to them. Many of them are posting about this, so it's easy to go and read what they're posting. There's lots of great resources out there. but getting direct feedback is really, really valuable. Like, we got feedback that women with an X is not more inclusive. In fact, it's the opposite. Most people felt excluded. They felt like we were trying to say that there were many types of women, and they're like, no, we're women. Like, please stop making us separate. And so what that was like, oh, great. Okay, awesome. And so then but they said, please put a phrase that's more, that like tells us that we are proactively included, that all types of women are included. So we added that. And it was such a great experience because we feel much better about what we're putting out. And we know that we've gotten feedback, at least from the community. We have a better chance of engaging them in our space. So that's one way. Camila, do you have other tips?
Yeah, well, that would go more on the research phase and a little bit of UX. But one would be know your audience, right? Spend a little bit of time understanding the personas and who comes to your platform, and what time they access, what's the demographics, are they accessing your website from the phone or on a desktop, so you can start understanding who is the person you're engaging, right? And second, it's a little bit of user testing, but at the end, it's just what Jen described, getting feedback, right? Before you publish something, just, put in front of a real reader, your user, and gather feedback. There's not a lot to do as far as, minimizing cognitive bias in content, unless you're, gather feedback and test with your audience and with actual people reading it before you publish.
There are some best practices you can also avoid. There's been a lot of writing on some of these topics, and it's worth reading those as well.
I would also say, as community who is at the recipient end of that work, I just really want to echo the importance of making sure that you're directly engaging the community from beginning to the end. Sometimes community can feel like we can feel really burnt by somebody, even though you have great intentions and a really great mission. If you're including us towards the end, or you ask for feedback once and then there's no follow-up, right? It's important that community feels a sense of ownership towards the project, and not just a data point, or just something that is helping to, because a lot of corporations and companies, specifically in tech, to call it out, right, do all of these very social justice things that are not heavily involving community. And then once a community does give feedback, then that's the end of that relationship. So if you're going to be creating a platform or that is amplifying what community is doing, make sure that they feel included from beginning to the end.
I love that.
So
that's such a great reminder. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. So we are running out of time, and I want to give Jen, Jordanos, and Shuki, some time to final remarks before I give the final announcements. Do you want to say anything?
Sure, I can. I just want to say thank you for creating this space. Thank you all for being so honest and sharing your challenges. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to jump in and help. It's always fun to work on other people's problems because they look so much like you're so much more optimistic when they're not your problems. And I know that some of this advice is very hard to implement as a very small organization. But I think you're doing immensely important work, and I'm super excited to see where it goes. Prioritization is critical. But yeah, so happy that this was helpful. I hope it was.
Very helpful. Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate having this opportunity. And I mean, just knowing that there is a community like you all's that is doing this type of work is not only heartwarming, but it's really uplifting. And I just want you all to know how immensely grateful we are. It really speaks to our city, our county, if you will, just not knowing where people are. The fact that there are such great professionals, or soon to be young comms professionals, who are willing to give up their time and their volunteerism to help organizations like ours, it really means a lot. And thank you. It's the resources, the feedback. I feel like we've learned so much. Chico?
I don't know how to follow up. Jordanos, I felt like that was very encompassing. It is, I mean, I'm a loss for words. I often say, like, don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, like, let's figure out what's there and make it better. And so to see that there are so many young folks who are trying to reinnovate and really perfect this area of work, it does give me a lot of encouragement.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time and letting us use your case study to expand on content strategy. And thanks, Jen, for your time. Before we wrap up, I have a few announcements. So this is our last event of ComLead Summer Event Series. Thank you all the 5 members of the ComLead COVID consultancy. Susan, Stacy, Ryan, Mo, and Hannah, and especially Evelyn for her excellent work putting these events together. Thank you so much. Special shout out to Mo for the tech support and her help facilitating the Q&A. Thanks to Alex, our ComLead head of creative strategy, for his leadership with the COVID consultancy. We will be sending out this video tonight with a short takeaway and a brief survey, so keep an eye out for these items in your inbox. If this kind of conversation appeals to you, consider pursuing a graduate degree with ComLead. You can visit our website to learn more about the program. And if you are in need of pro bono communication consulting, please connect with COVID Consultancy.